Hey everybody, Kris Gethin here. Now, if you're over the age of 35, like myself, your enzyme levels have already begun to decline. Enzymes are the workhorses of digestion. They break down your food into usable macro and micronutrients. Now, research shows that the time that someone hits 65 years old, their saliva and pancreatic secretions, both of which involved in enzyme activity, have declined by as much as 50%. Now, if you've looked at my Instagram posts, my stories, you'll notice that quite often if I'm eating out, if I'm having a steak or something like that, I am eating my Masszymes by Bioptimizers. Now, the reason why I take this is because it has over 102% more proteins than the nearest competitor and 300 to 500 more per serving the most popular brands. Now, this is crucial because as us being bodybuilders or athletes, we require a lot of protein. And it isn't just about how much you eat, it's always how much you absorb. So you got to break it down. So not only does the Masszymes contain more proteins, it also contains 13 additional enzymes, including lipase for fat digestion, which work at a very high pH level from 2 to 12. In other words, at every state of digestion. So you can try this right now today, risk-free. They're 365 day, let me get that right, 365 day full money back guarantee is the gold standard. So if you feel that Masszymes are going to help you upgrade your digestion like mine and power through your food, their support team will give you a no question asked refund. And when you go to masszymes.com/Kris20, be sure to enter that coupon code Kris20 to receive a 20% discount off that order. Hello everybody, Kris Gethin here and welcome to the Knowledge and Mileage podcast. Of course we have another fantastic show for you today because we got another fantastic guest. Now, before I talk about this guest, I've been using this device now called Mind Alive. And if anybody is actually watching the YouTube, you can see me actually holding it up here. And this is what I've been using this over the past week or so. And I got the headphones and I got the fancy glasses here. So I don't know what my girlfriend thinks of me when she comes into the room and sees me wearing this in the evening. But this has been quite a game changer. Anybody that follows me knows that I have had trouble sleeping in the past. I'm doing so many different kind of, quote unquote biohacks to help with that. And I quantify it with, like my Aura ring, etc. But this has really knocked me out. I haven't been using this device specifically for other settings, for alertness or anything like that as yet, purely for sleep. And this has really worked phenomenally. So I have got the main man behind this device. Thank you for coming on to the show, Dave. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Kris. Thank you.
And, I've got some questions for you to find out exactly how this is working and how this could help my listeners, specifically those that are stressed, that put themselves through a lot of physical stress. And obviously, I always tell people your performance is dictated by your recovery. So, I'm sure this is a phenomenal piece that can assist with people's recovery because cortisol level seems to be through the roof these days and everybody's lacking in sleep. So could you tell us just a little bit about yourself, Dave, and how you came about to invent such a thing?
Well, I'm actually trained in electronics engineer, who always liked psychology or neuropsychology. I always thought that was a blast. I just loved that stuff. And I came around this purely by accident. I had a job at the University of Alberta, and I was designing a research lab to treat TMJ dysfunction. And all the dentists were making splints and all that stuff for the teeth and trying to balance the jaw and all this. And I just thought that there was a pattern I was seeing that was probably more psychological than dental. So I got involved with the psychology guys a little bit there and got a big intake form, and we were doing a big intake on all of our patients, and discovered that almost all of them were wives of oil workers. And that's what was really exciting. And Alberta's a big oil producer, but our oil's kind of expensive to extract. You may have heard of the tar sands up here.
Yeah.
And so we need higher oil prices for those corporations to extract the oil and ship it to market. Anyway, oil was down to about $15 a barrel in the 80s, and interest rates in Canada at that time were 18%. So painfully expensive interest rates, and a lot of people lost their homes in the 80s because of that. Anyway, these were certainly the wives of the oil workers, and they indicated that financial worries and increasing arguments with their spouse were the two primary conditions that occurred in their lives 3 to 6 months prior to having TMJ pain. And so I was building this research lab and also learning physiology, and started teaching physiology. I made an electrostimulator at that point that I was selling to dentists mainly. And then an instructor in performing arts gave me a call. They had heard about that we were kind of mad scientists up there doing all kinds of weird things, and asked me if I would build this flashing light machine to help the students overcome stage fright. I'd never heard of it before, and I thought it was really one of the craziest new age, what's the word? Not necessarily a new age scam, but just new age craziness. And I just didn't think it would ever going to work or anything. But anyway, he wanted me to build it, so I worked on one in my spare time and slowly got it built. And he said it was working quite well for his students overcome stage fright. And one of the things he was doing is because entrainment is quite powerful as a hypnotic induction tool. So he was putting his students into age regression hypnosis and taking them back to the point of their fear, which was often grade 3 Christmas performance or something like that at school, and little Johnny forgot his lines. and even though the teachers understood and the parents understood, he got himself traumatized anyway. And now he has all the stage fright when he's on the university level. So they were getting back into those causes and rectifying them. And that's what kind of got me started. But then I thought, well, let's try our 10 worst TMJ patients who had pain for 10 years or more. And I put them on the machine at an alpha wave frequency. And in 15 minutes, and we also measured their jaw tension with an electromyograph or EMG. And we measured their finger temperature. Flight or fight makes hands cold. So when people get anxious, their fingers get cold. And so these 10 people had very cold fingers and very tense jaws. And in the course of 15 minutes, their EMG was almost nothing. Their pain had gone away completely, and their hands were very warm, whereas they were quite cold when they started. And so that was the day that I really got excited that this stuff actually had a scientific basis to it. I didn't quite understand what the scientific basis was, but we knew it worked. So we published that study, and I guess the rest has been history. We've just sailed from there, from that point onward.
Wow. And who has been your specific customer base that are using, this? But, you're obviously using light, but you're using sound with this as well. And I suspect both, when did you come across that sound waves work well in conjunction with the light therapy that you're using?
Well, originally what happened is when we built it, we just built it with the sound in. We didn't even know if sound was a good thing or not. But it wasn't until later on that I started finding studies that showed that actually pulse sounds too, they drive brain waves and they increase cerebral blood flow and things like that. They're not as strong as lights are. Lights probably do 2/3 of the work. But a few studies have been done since then to show that sound is certainly a part of it. I don't think it's an essential part of it necessarily, but it does boost the effect of the lights.
Yeah, for sure. I find it very meditative. Obviously, you're listening to something that's pulsating or like a heartbeat. It's, I've had trouble staying awake more than probably 5 minutes, to be honest with you, when I'm actually using this device. I look at the different settings and how long they are, and a session could be 36 minutes. I'm probably lucky to get 6 minutes. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's very typical. It's actually a good thing. A few things happen. When it really works, people are typically gone or they're tranced out in about a 6-minute time period. And that also correlates with lactate and ATP, adenosine triphosphate, really driving up in the brain along with cerebral blood flow. And I can't quite say why there's this profound relaxation effect that is a trance and how it correlates with cerebral blood flow, ATP, and lactate, but all three happen at about the same time. And I honestly can't quite say why sort of the subjective experience synchronizes with the neurological events, but they do correlate for sure. And when that happens, it's actually a very good thing. We bank on people trancing out. If they don't trance out, they don't get as good an experience.
Right. Okay. Got it. So I'm traveling tomorrow. Like I spend so much time traveling. I just got back from India and Sri Lanka last week. And I find that obviously traveling into different time zones, and I know that I've got to get my sleep because I may be hosting a seminar the following day. You know, sometimes because you're in a different time zone and your brain is racing, I suspect taking this device, because it's very easy, you know, it's got a travel pack, bag and everything, to actually take with you. And I assume this would work very well when traveling into different time zones, correct?
Yes, a lot of people use it for jet lag. I use it. I travel a fair bit too, and I use it for my jet lag too. I'll run like a theta session or Schumann resonance session when I want to assist my sleep, and when I want to wake up in the morning or the new morning.
Yeah.
I will run definitely the Energizer, and then have a big cup of coffee. You know, you want to get the brain fired up to your new time zone so you adjust faster.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, so I travel to the East Coast tomorrow, and I noticed Ben Greenfield actually used this probably a month or so ago when he traveled to the East Coast. He actually used it during the day just to have a nap. So this is definitely going to be something I'll try out, and I'll report back when I return.
Yes, in fact, that's a good application for it. With jet lag, you can be very tired at weird times, and if you run a session, it can give you a good 3 or 4 hours of good mental and physical boost, which if you're doing conferences and stuff, that's real important. Otherwise, it just look like you're exhausted, right?
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you're only there for 2 days, so it is definitely quality time over quantity.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So, going back to the question that I started asking before I went off on one, what are the main demographic of people that are purchasing and using this device? Is it people that, like you said, have stage fright, or is it people that have sleeping problems? Are they athletes? Who is this specifically targeted towards?
Well, I should start a little bit at the beginning, I guess. When I got into this, I wanted to make sure, because blinking lights looked like such a hocusy-pocusy thing that they could easily just be laughed at by anybody with, in academia or clinicians, psychologists, and so on. So it was my goal to try and impress the scientific community, and I made an agreement with myself that I could not impress. If I couldn't impress the scientific community, then I shouldn't be playing this game. I should get out and do something else. So I went straight for the research angle and started lecturing at psychology conferences, mostly to do with biofeedback and neurofeedback. Those people were quite receptive to alternate brain technologies. So that was the direction I went, and I thought, if I can't hold my own in front of 300 neuroscientists and get through that without getting yelled at or criticized, then that was my acid test to see if I should be staying in the business. And sure enough, I did good research, and everybody liked what I was doing, and in fact, I'm invited to conferences all the time now. So it worked out really well. So most of my clients are patients of psychologists, chiropractors, some doctors, neuropsychologists, and that kind of a thing. In terms of demographics, it's used for ADHD, general stress and anxiety, depression, sleep issues. Lately, we've been doing a lot of research with concussions.
Wow.
Football players, PTSD. The U.S. military, it's called the Semper Fi Marine Fund. They've been buying about 40 units a month for the last 3 or 4 years for Marines.
Interesting.
Yeah, for PTSD, and simultaneously treats their concussion. So we're having a lot of fun with brain injuries right now. It's very exciting to see someone whose brain has been shut down for 20 years, and they just can't function. They can't work, they can't barely operate their lives. And in 20 minutes, I see their brain fire up.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, I do have a lot of followers that are in the military, so I'm sure this is something that could be of possible interest. People reach out to me from a psychological standpoint as well as from a physical standpoint, asking questions quite often. Now, when you're working with people, obviously, like with, for instance, like concussion, are you then working with somebody that's providing additional advice, such as intermittent fasting or a ketogenic diet that may actually work simultaneously with this device?
I'm always, I mean, again, an engine only runs as good as the fuel that's in it. So I'm always a big promoter or a big pusher of good nutrition, especially if the brain isn't working well. So the vitamin D is real important. So are minerals and vitamins and all that stuff. Yeah, I'm big on that. But the machine does, Chris, when we do our research, we can't confound our studies with nutrition and other things on the side. Then nobody knows if the device actually worked. So when we do research, they don't change their diet at all. Everything stays the same, and we see how the device works, and it works remarkably well, all on its own.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, because this is the day and age where nootropics are a huge seller. It's a huge market. So I'm wondering, are people actually utilizing both as a way to enhance their performance of their brain signaling? Now,
Yep.
As I mentioned before, in today's age, and why I was one of those victims that was basically sleeping 3 hours a night on average. This was up until about 5 years ago, and that lasted for over 10 years. I really, really had a problem. And I've really worked hard on myself to make sure that my hormones are in check. I'm being a little bit more present, trying to relax, trying to meditate, but I'm always still trying to hack that area because I know that we cannot get too much quality sleep because, like I said, I quantify my sleep, people do in different ways, but it isn't just the amount of hours that I'm in bed. I'm trying to quantify, it's the actual quality of that sleep. What have you noticed with people's sleep? Because I will say that my girlfriend had one complaint after I used this the first time. Didn't happen so much the second time. The first time, she'd never heard me snore the way that I snored that night. She filmed it. I hope
you were deep.
It was unbelievable. When she played that back to me the next day, because I woke up, she was in a different room. She slept downstairs. Sure. She didn't want to bother me, but it was profound, deep sleep. Is this something that you have noticed from patients or anybody that has tried this device, that they started snoring because their sleep is deeper? I don't know if that is a correlation.
We get mixed. Some people snore more, some people snore less.
Yeah,
I can't quite say why, but and some people sleep extremely deep. Again, especially if they've got a traumatic brain injury, either from viral infections. Now, you mentioned you were only sleeping 3 hours a night. It's possible that you had a TBI or a traumatic brain injury, either from a viral infection or from a blow to the head, a concussion or something. I used
to race motocross, so I had a few concussions.
Okay. But what happens, you see, and I've got a 90-minute video on YouTube that explains the whole thing and how that plays out and how entrainment fixes it. And I showed several different cases of people that we have completely recovered from their brain injuries. So one of the things that happens with brain injuries is that often the brain isn't actually injured. And these people pass MRIs and the doctors say there's nothing wrong with them and just, kind of smarten up and quit being such a deadbeat, get your act together. And they can't. Because what happens is during the inflammation, the circuits to the thalamus and our alpha waves, like you say, you meditate. Meditation is about making alpha waves. That's one of the aspects of meditation, is to make beautiful uniform alpha waves. And that's a loop between the skin of our brain where the neurons are, the cortex, to the thalamus. And there's a little ping pong that goes on there, especially when we close our eyes and we're meditating. We make and we're not using our cognitive part of our brain. We make a lot of alpha. And alpha typically involves the firing of about 50, 60 billion neurons 10 times a second. So you're looking at about 500 billion impulses a second when you make good alpha. And that's a lot. And that's important because that tells the cells that make myelin, they're called oligodendrocytes. It tells them where the neurons are because they have to see action potentials, or they don't myelinate. And if they don't myelinate, you eventually lose all your myelination and you have all those like MS and other problems, which we see in our research. But one of the things when you lose your alpha waves, you can't relax. And you can't, so you have people who typically have generalized anxiety. They also have terrible sleep. Like say they sleep 3 hours a night or so, and that's about the best they can do.
Yeah, they're wired and tired.
Exactly. And we also see that most of the time they become obsessive compulsive. So pretty much every single person who's had their alpha wave shut down on them from inflammation show a spot right here, right down the center of the head, which is the OCD signature. And so we've got dozens of documented cases of hoarders, counters, cutters, ritualists, anorexics, gamers who can't stop. Because once the alpha wave shut down, for whatever reason, it shifts into this obsessive compulsive pattern, along with the anxiety and the sleeplessness. And so, yeah, these people have all these other side issues then, which are always misdiagnosed, but they're all like a spectrum of disorders, all coming from the same source. And what is most disappointing, or what's the word? I don't know if disappointing is the best word, but because it's caused by brain inflammation, it's also prevalent in so many people who've had a viral infection of some sort, and their brain has shut down, and the signature looks identical to someone in a car accident or a football injury or military. But because they had a viral infection, like a flu, Lyme disease, or maybe something like this, they don't know that would cause their brain to shut down. I mean, if you go to your doctor and say, well, I had a big bang to my head, and now I'm all messed up, they would say, well, it was the bang to your head. But when you say, I'm just all messed up and I don't know why, well, then it's people just usually blame themselves, and they try so hard to get better, and all their family and friends and doctors blame them too, for being deadbeats or just not trying hard or trying to, get a easy life on the backs of everybody else, and it's so unfair. And these people then, they just struggle with depression on top of it all because they feel so bad as humans for not getting their act together. And especially when they get an MRI done too, and the doctor says, you're absolutely fine. Because I say these don't generally show up on an MRI, go back to work or get your act together. And it just destroys their personal lives just because of that diagnosis telling them there's nothing wrong and to smarten up. So, and doctors just refuse to use EEGs. And I don't know why, but until we put them on an EEG, and we're like, holy smokes, your brain is just a mess. And we're doing a brain map, and that in itself gives them a lot of relief. But we always put them on the entrainment, and typically about 20 minutes, we'll see their alpha waves fire back up. And they'll start to just pound out the screen as the EEGs are flowing through. And that immediately clears their brain. And that night, they'll sleep 10 hours.
Wow. Interesting. Now, do you find, like you said, you'll find if you diagnose these people, it could be from a viral infection. Would they have the similar type of symptoms if they had some sort of inflammatory response from mold toxins, for instance? Some people are very susceptible to mold toxins.
Well, we haven't done all that. We haven't done all that research yet, but it wouldn't surprise me, especially if they show the symptoms of general anxiety, terrible sleep, and they're obsessive compulsive about something, like say hoarders, counters, cutters, ritualists, anorexics. If their personality suddenly shifts in that direction, more than likely they'll have that shutdown of their alpha waves, which we call it a thalamocortical disconnect.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So I went to a person called Dr. Spanaug. Dr. Spanaug's clinic. He's in Oldsmar, Florida. And I went there probably 5 years ago now, and luckily I got some good friends in the industry who suggested this person, because I tried everything, on 3 hours of sleep, and I would say I'd be a little bit obsessive compulsive. I wouldn't take a day off the gym, and I would use that 3 hours of sleep to my advantage because I was angry, and then I'd use that anger to my advantage to go work out, So it was it was definitely a ritual of mine. And it wasn't until I actually went to Dr. Spinaug's clinic, I had all the blood tests, the hair follicle, everything. But he actually did the brain fry scan on me, and he treated a lot of people with Lyme's disease, a lot of people. So he kind of understood the nature of the beast. And when he described my characteristics, it was shocking. It was like the guy had followed me for the past 10 years. And he actually pointed it towards mold toxin exposure. I was living in Mumbai for about 4 years. It's a very humid area of the world. And he thinks it actually came from that. So he put me on, various types of natural supplements, various nutritional protocol. I was there for 6 weeks, IV, colonic hydrotherapy, you name it. And it took me several years to get good sleep. But I'm still trying to quantify, like I said, the quality of my sleep now. So
Sure.
have you noticed over a certain period of time, people's sleep quality improve when using I guess the David Delight Pro is the Mind Alive product that I got?
Well, yeah, they've got the concussion type or the brain injury type from inflammation. Their sleep will improve same day. General stress and anxiety, typically you see pretty good improvements. If they have a fast-running, eyes-closed alpha, which usually signals high adrenaline levels in the brain, or norepinephrine.
Yeah.
That's the brain's adrenaline. They respond extremely well to the CES part of that device.
So the CES, which setting is that?
Well, you said you had a Delight Pro, right? That's where
Yes.
you plug in the ear clips.
Ah, right. Okay, so I have them on. Perfect. Yes, I've been wearing them.
Yeah, they respond very well to that stimulation because that hits the brainstem. And norepinephrine comes from the brainstem, and so it seems to settle that down.
Interesting. Okay, maybe that will explain the immense snoring from the very first night.
Well, you were probably extremely relaxed. And the gear doesn't work on all types of insomnia. There's other things too. Like, for instance, one of the best sleeping pills I've used is liquid, like vitamin D oil. Put 1,000 IU drop, just drop it on your chest and rub it in with your finger so it absorbs transdermally. That can knock people out very deep. I got hundreds of people doing vitamin D that way and using it as a sleep aid.
Interesting. And how much are you using or suggesting?
Well, a couple of things. You have to make sure you don't overdose your normal daily allowance, or it'll trigger insomnia. So the average woman, about 3,000 IU a day, and the average guy, about 4,000.
Okay.
But you start your day kind of at nighttime, and you can put 1,000 on the chest. Maybe you can put also a 1,000 IU drop on your tongue. If you wake up at 3 a.m., put another drop on your chest, and it'll probably get you right through to 7 or 8. And then take the balance in the morning, if there's a balance to be had. And that works very well. The other thing, too, is that as we age, our testosterone and estrogen levels slowly drift downward. And estrogen and testosterone also inhibit cortisol. So and vitamin D increases serotonin, which is helps you get back to. So that's how vitamin D works, is by increasing serotonin and getting you back to sleep that way. But on the cortisol side, another great sleep aid, if you're in your 50s and 60s or 70s now, is to buy a bottle of DHEA and take a 25 milligram tablet at bedtime, and you can sleep profoundly deep right through till like 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning. So I've been taking DHEA for a few years now at nighttime, not in the morning. Most people think they should take it in the morning because it boosts testosterone and estrogen, but it's really powerful taking it at night.
Right. Okay. Fascinating. Now, are you working with athletes as well with this device? Because as I said, performance is dictated by your recovery. Like, I participate in various types of sports. I've competed as a natural professional bodybuilder up in Canada, actually. It was one of my last shows. And I also compete in like Ironman events, ultramarathons. So I'm a bit of a hybrid athlete. I'm a bit of a bigger hybrid athlete, participating as endurance events. But as you can imagine, recovery is at the forefront of my performance. So are you working with athletes to assist with their recovery with this device?
We don't work with very many. We just kind of get them when we know about them. But Frank Zane was one of the first athletes to use our gear, and he was finding that it reduced lactic acid, and he had much faster recovery after workouts and better workouts. Certain players of the NHL have used the gear. Certain players with the NFL have used our gear. One player, he went from a couple $100,000 a year to about $1 million a year after he started using our gear. But probably he probably had a concussion and it treated it, and so he improved as a wide receiver. He was just much sharper and on the ball, and did a much better game. And we've worked with a lot of NFL players post-career who've lost their careers after concussion, and sometimes they go violent as well. That's one of the unfortunate parts of a brain injury. And yes, we've fixed probably 24 NFL players with some of our colleagues in California so far. But we've also worked with all kinds of individual athletes, golfers. Rocky Thompson was a world-famous golfer who never won first place. He always took third, fourth, or fifth. Then this is on the mental side of the game, much more so. And we got him on the gear, and within a few weeks, he beat Lee Trevino, and was very excited about that. And then our colleague who was teaching the golf taught him visualization techniques while he was using the David, and he went to Japan and got his first hole-in-one in his life and won $1 million. But he was kind of an angry golfer, and that's why he never played well. He would get into fear-based golf, and as soon as he started having a bad, when he had a bad hole or a couple of bad shots, he would start wrapping his club around things. And the gear calmed him right down, so he quit making judgment errors, and that's really how he improved his game so much. He just kept calm. So it works on both sides. We've got right now a fencer excuse me, who is using it, and she's really taken off in her improvements, mostly on her mental game. If you have a Delight Pro, you can also take some probes that we sell. And let's say you pull a ligament or you damage a muscle or something like that. You can plug into that with some probes that we have, and you can put them on your muscle, and you can put a little electrical. You can zap your muscle a bit for 10 or 15 minutes. And just use it as a muscle recovery. We call it. That's called MET. It's electrotherapy, muscle electrotherapy, and so you can use it on body parts as well as on the brain. Other than that, there's an Indy 500 racing car driver who used it to train his students in a simulator before they drove the real car and smashed up the real car, which are expensive. And and they won all kinds of tournaments. Christine Boudre used it in a unique way. She was a speed skater in the Olympics in Canada, and she had fell on the ice on training, and a skater from behind her ran into her and cut her, I think, 150 stitches had to put in her leg.
Wow.
She almost bled to death. So when she did her visualizations, she always visualized people passing her, because if she's at the back of the line, she's not going to get hurt by someone running into her. But of course, she wasn't winning much for competitions because her own subconscious was now fighting her. So as soon as she started using the gear, she started visualizing passing people and getting to the front of the line. And she took silver within the year of using the David device. And even post-training, like sometimes post-Olympics, and because you're quite an active person in sports, you get cut off from your family and friends, and it's so intense, the training that you do, and people are often isolated and lonely. And once the event ends, they fall into depression.
Yeah, that used to happen to me all the time. I'd always say the day that I cross the finish line is probably the worst day of my training.
Yep. So we worked with Catherine Garceau, and she wrote a book called Swimming Above Water, and it was all about. She was a synchronized swimmer. And they took, I think, bronze in Australia back 15 years ago.
2003, I believe. I was there.
Okay, yep. And she and some of her friends went into serious depression after that event. And she was a buff, tough girl, and suddenly was now 250 pounds and all out of shape and eating junk. And she used the David device to get her out of depression. And now again, she's a tough, buff girl and very fit. And so she wrote a book about it. In fact, we've got a 30-minute interview on YouTube with her talking about how she used it to get out of her depression and get back to health and fitness.
Interesting. We'll make sure that we put all these links in the show notes as well, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening to the podcast. They're not actually watching the YouTube. They want to see what this device looks like, how it works, and how it could possibly facilitate their needs as well. Because we all know somebody that's dealing with anxiety, depression, or somebody's had concussion. And I used to race motocross, and I know a lot of top motocross riders today. I'm sure because as they get a little bit older, it isn't always because their physicality is starting to decline. It's just that mental agility, the reaction times, to hit the gate as soon as the gates drop down to make sure that you get that hole shot. That's what generally starts to decline. So if there's something here, like you said, right, that can really help with that neurocognitive function, and that alertness, I'm sure this will have a huge impact. And we know a lot of people in the UFC as well. I'm sure this would be something that would be very beneficial to those guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, both pre-game, to get really relaxed and get rejuvenated, and also, say, to fend off head injuries and stuff like that as well. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. And have you measured people's cortisol levels at all to see if that has a positive effect on their cortisol?
Sort of the best way we've done, no, we haven't officially, but the way we have done it is that cortisol is acidic. And so what people will do is you can get litmus paper and you can do salivary pH, and often it'll be quite acidic prior to running a session. Then when you're done your session, you'll see it's much more balanced, right around 7, which is neutral. And those are we've done that many times with people using an acid test off their saliva. But not a cortisol test per se, directed test, no.
Right, okay. So would you suggest, because I'm going to be using this device, I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive, would you suggest that I use this every night? Would you suggest I use it on the times that I'm a little bit more anxious? What are your recommendations with this?
Well, given that you potentially have a couple of concussions, I would recommend you use it in the morning when you wake up. If you feel that you've got some depression in your makeup, then use the mood booster sessions.
Yeah.
So wake up, go to the bathroom, do your thing, drink a big glass of water, and run it then. Or run the brain booster sessions, the SMR beta sessions. One of those, there's about 3 there that you could pick from. See which one works best for you. But most of our people, in fact, pretty much all of our people with brain injuries, they're instructed to use it when they wake up. And they will sleep way deeper that night without even using it at nighttime, just by getting their brain settled down and getting the neurons firing. Whenever brains don't fire right, they seem to get agitated, and anxiety is kind of the spin-off. But of course, these people don't make alpha waves either, so it really compounds their problems.
Right, okay. Are you suggested to always be lying down when you use this?
I would recommend it. Yeah, I think it works best if you're lying down or reclined in a chair.
Yeah, okay.
Because you really want to be really relaxed and just let everything go.
Right.
Now, you can't. That being said, we do have a set of eye sets that have holes in them, and you can do cognitive things, whether it's brain games, math. Trainers, they say when the Indy 500 guys were using it, they were using the ViewHole eye sets while they were training on the simulators, and the device was keeping them in the zone so they could do the right moves better. And then you just learn faster if you make less mistakes. The more you do training properly in the first place, the faster you learn.
Right. Okay.
Right.
I'm actually going to be seeing somebody next week in LA. His name's Jeff Ward. He used to be a top supercross rider, won many international and world champion events, and he actually retired and went Indy 500 for a couple of years there. Won some events there, a very versatile athlete. So I'll definitely speak to him about this. Now, me being a bodybuilder, and a lot of my listeners are weight trainers as well, I use a lot of visualization techniques. Maybe I'll visualize the clothes that I'm wearing before I train legs on that particular day. Now, we all talk about taking our pre-workout, getting amped up or anything like this. Would you think this could be part of that pre-workout ritual to help with that visualization?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we did that plenty with golfers, because golfers get paralysis by analysis. So we had them use the gear prior to a game and visualize also doing perfect shots or getting out of sand traps or things like this.
Right.
And yes, we have a whole little training program on it. In fact, I've got a really nice video showing pro golfers using it. They put marker tape on their clubs. They'd shoot a bunch of balls off, and then they would use the session, then come back and then reshoot. And they would get much more accurate shots and further shots. Some people went 30 yards farther after they ran entrainment off the David device. Just, half an hour later, they would get 30 yards farther just by relaxing their muscles and getting their mind in shape and so on. But what else was I going to say about that? Gee, there was something more I was going to say about that I kind of got off track with the golfers.
The pre-workout ritual was talking about the visualization for that.
That's right. Yeah, we actually have a session on the device called skill development. And it's meant to be used with our X-ray process, X-ray being E-X-R-A-Y.
Right.
Think of a time when you had exceptional performance. Recall and relive it in your mind with as good a detail as you can, and apply it into the new situation you're going into, and say yes as you see your way through your obstacles. So that's the E-X-R-A-Y. And it's meant to be used on that skill development one. Now, the skill development one is a 2-part session. And I think it's mood booster number 4, maybe number 5 on the device that you have.
Okay, all right.
And the first 10 minutes of it or so are in alpha. And that's when it's kind of putting into a meditative state of mind. And that is where you think of the X-ray process. Imagine yourself being just in the best mentally calm but alert state, whatever state you need to be in a body-mind state for the application you're going into. Imagine it then. Now, one of the things, of course, when people engage in their activity, especially if it's kind of stressful, they get over-aroused. And then they get over the over-aroused end of the performance curve. If you're too relaxed or too wound, you miss the peak of that performance curve. So they get over-aroused often. So the second half of that session takes you into beta waves, because typically when you're engaging on that task, you'll be in pretty intense beta because you're being focused and all of that. But we're pulling into it that body-mind state you had during the first meditative half of it. So you're kind of bringing into the performance state a meditative body-mind as it brings you into the beta. So it does about 10 minutes in alpha, and then we make the stimulation very complex to kind of wake you up in case you've kind of drifted off some. We want to wake you up and let you know that this is going into the performance part of the program now, and that is when you actually visualize the execution of your activity, whether you're volleying tennis balls over the court or you're doing pool. In fact, even dentists have used this to improve their dentistry. So that's when you visualize the execution part of it. So in your case, maybe it'd be the bodybuilding. You'd be imagining picking up those weights and just doing it really well, as well as you could, so you can pick. As you know, there's a flip to the arms and you're picking up weights, and if you do that and get your posture just right, you can actually pick up more weight. But a lot of it has to do with that posture and that flip. So you'd visualize all of that prior to going in to actually doing that event.
Right. Okay. Interesting. I look forward to actually trying that out as part of my pre-workout ritual and reporting back on that, which I'll do for my viewers. And I'll also put the links to, like you said, all these videos that we have here in the show notes.
Yeah, now, as you said, you knock out in about 6 minutes. So in this case, you don't want to quite drift all the way off. You want to have some control, which might mean you need to dim your lights a little bit,
right,
so it doesn't take you away too deep.
Got it. Well, I would be using this in the daytime before my workout, correct? Yeah. So I'm sure right. I'm going to be okay then. I don't usually sleep during the day, but at the end of the night, that's when I'm kind of focused and relaxing and unwinding. So I'm sure I won't drop off in the daytime. Well, I hope not. Anyway, before my workout, it'll be quite a waste of time for my pre-workout to kick in if I go to fall asleep on it.
Sure. I was going to say, to anything that keeps the brain sharper, and which this gear does, helps in all kinds of ways. Often when people's brains start to get a little sluggish, they start to crave carbs.
Right. Yeah.
Because means raw sugar will spike up the brain a little bit, and when you spike insulin, it also allows a little more serotonin to liberate itself through the brain, so you feel more peaceful and relaxed and happy, and a little more energetic. So it helps to steer people away from going into bad habits, like having a beer or eating donut or something like that too. So that is the other nice thing, let's say, about brain technologies that keep the mind sharp, is it just helps us. Plus, your cognitive function, which is in the front area of your brain, can reason and rationalize and make better decisions, and it also inhibits emotional stuff. The brain starts getting foggy. We start getting emotional because it can't put. This is a brake center. The frontal part of the brain does a lot of work putting on brakes. And you'll see people who, like when we brain map people, if they're not working well in the front, they're all over the board emotionally, and they're eating this junk, having that beer. They're upset, they're happy, they're up and down, like a yo-yo, and because the front part of the brain is just not, and they're making bad decisions. They make compulsive decisions, and they get into trouble. They may go to the bar and just get wasted when they should have stopped, and they get a DUI, because they're not making good choices, and they're not putting the brakes on these wild emotions that are all over the board. So long as we always keep that brain tuned up, we prevent ourselves from doing crazy things. Or what I call things that chase dopamine. When our brain doesn't work well, we often lose dopamine, so we chase dopamine. Junk food is dopamine. Going to the bar, having affairs, those are all giant dopamine activities. And when we recklessly chase things to drive up dopamine, we become dopes.
Yeah.
We do dopey things. So the term kind of fits.
Yeah.
But when we keep our brain sharp, we have better lives, we have better relationships, we do better performances, we make more money. Everything is good when we have a better brain.
Yeah, for sure. That's quite fascinating because, a lot of our listeners listening right now, a lot of them will go through transformations. They will get ready for a 12-week transformation contest. They'll get ready for a show, get ready for a photo shoot. They're physical-based people. One of the biggest problems all of them have, though, is major cravings. And like based on that, because they're in a calorie deficit, they're craving for sugar, making poor judgment decisions, because then they get a lot more emotional because they are in this calorie deficit. So, maybe this is something that could possibly help them through that process to make those rational thoughts.
Yeah, when you get in a calorie deficient state of mind, typically the frontal lobes will start to slow down. You see this a lot with, and then they lose their brakes. Do you have any little kids, or have you seen little kids like 3 or 4 or 5-year-olds?
Yeah, I got 2 nieces that one's 2, one's 4.
Okay, and they start to get tired. That's if they've been up too long. Maybe they're visiting family and they've been up too long. And so they start getting hyperactive.
Yeah, exactly. I noticed that. My sister says that when they get hyperactive, they're getting tired now. They need to go to bed, and they go the opposite way.
That's right. So when they start getting tired, the brain works in 2 ways. It's got a gas pedal, but it's got a brake guy. And when the brain starts getting tired, the brake guy kind of goes to sleep, and he doesn't put the brakes on anymore. Then they get hyperactive and wildly emotional. And so you need sleep to actually calm down. And that's sort of the essence of Ritalin. When they use it for ADHD kids, the brain is running very slow. If it's real ADHD, they're making big theta waves in the front areas, again, where the brakes are. So they take speed, and the speed wakes up the frontal lobes. The frontal lobes put the brakes on the motor strip, and then they calm down. And that's counterintuitive. You wouldn't normally think that speed would calm someone down. But if you're over that line where you got no brakes anymore, then speed will have a big calming effect. Now, for a normal person, you take speed, it'll just wind you up. You have to be so slowed down that you have no more brakes. And then speed puts on the brakes. The downside of Ritalin, of course, is it's so misdiagnosed and so misused all over the place. There's much better ways of learning to wake up a brain or have a healthier, more functional brain than just using drugs to try to snap it back into functionality.
Yeah, and I've noticed, I don't know what it's like in Canada, Dave, but over here in the US, like I moved over here originally in 2005. I was living in LA. I was working for Weeder Publications. Moved away, I came up to Boise, moved away, and came back. And I just found that so many people that I know are on this drug called Adderall. Like, being from Europe, I've never heard of Adderall, and everybody that I speak to in Europe has never heard of it. But it seems to be prevalent here that people have some form of addiction on this Adderall. They used it in college, but now they've used it throughout their adult life because they have that addiction to it. Is this the same thing in Canada as well?
Much more controlled in Canada. In Canada, all our healthcare is government run, and it's not private industry. And so you'll see when it comes to doling out of drugs, it's handled much more responsibly, and I guess, just more responsibly and more of a scientific basis on how it's handled. It's not just doled out for profit. It's probably the biggest difference, I would say, between the U.S. and other countries around the world, is it's profit-based. Canada, that is taken out of the picture, so a physician will prescribe it if he thinks it's necessary.
Yeah.
Not for a trip to Mexico or something like that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm no physician, and I'm not going to make any structure function claims. But the people that I've associated myself with, that I know that actually take Adderall on a consistent basis, I do notice there are certain characteristics where they are easily distracted, or you may be talking to that particular person, but they are so focused on their phone or whatever it may be, they're not even listening to you. And I find that they've become very forgetful over time. You will have a conversation, they don't remember it the next time. You've asked for something to get done, an email or whatever, and they don't even read that email. I don't know if that's something that you've noticed yourself, Dave, but it's something that I've definitely noticed, and I'm very concerned.
Well, old drugs beat up the brain sooner or later. And the thing is, too, the hippocampus, again, Adderall is mimicking norepinephrine. It's driving the brain hard. And again, there's a performance curve in the brain, and it's pushing them probably way on the far end of the performance curve. And their cortisol levels are high, their norepinephrine is high, their adrenals are working hard. As you know, so many people get skinny on Adderall, on stimulant meds. And that'll shut down brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And so over time, because they're in a sympathetic state, not a parasympathetic state, so their arousal is way too high. And that eventually burns out the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is the main learning center of the brain. And it just gets burnt out, and it just quits running. And that's the same as stress. You put someone in high-stress situations like military and stuff like this, police, first responders, really not a lot different than taking Adderall, but at the end of the day, it's too bad because you don't need to take drugs to boost the brain. You can boost the brain immensely with all kinds of non-drug approaches, like entrainment is one of them. Getting a decent sleep. Here's an example. You see high levels of ADHD kids around airports, freeways, this where there's a lot of noise. In cheap apartment buildings that are maybe wood construction rather than concrete construction, so there's a lot of noise from adjacent suites, and the crashing around of other tenants kind of half wakes up a little child all night long or several times in the night. So then they're tired. So then they put them on Adderall when they really just need a good night's sleep. That's well documented that a lot of kids are not sleeping well, or from environmental noise. And as you know, it's very noisy in the United States. There's not a lot of respect between cars and air conditioners and everything else. There's not a lot of respect for the importance of keeping things quieter. So you mostly see people who are lower socioeconomic statuses. They have a tendency to show more behavior disorders and more ADHD and so on, just because they're not sleeping as well. Because people in higher income brackets typically like to live in the suburbs where it's a lot quieter.
Yeah, interesting. And it's unfortunate that doctors or physicians aren't actually suggesting this because it's low-hanging fruit, it's free. However, they're normally peddled the drugs because it's convenient and it's costly.
Yeah, and the drugs just mask the symptoms. Like as most drugs do, they don't get to the cause. That's very typical, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me on this on the show, Dave. It's been very I'd say educational for myself, certainly, and I'm definitely going to be sharing this with a lot of my friends, like I said, that are on the Adderall anyway. And please do, all my listeners, feel free to share it as well. So I will definitely be experimenting more with this device whilst I'm traveling, and I'll report back. And I'm really looking forward to using it as part of my pre-workout ritual. Because I do, think about what I'm going to do when I'm in the gym. And so once I get in there, I'm just going through the motions. And, as I'm getting a little bit older, a little bit longer in the tooth, I still want to ensure that I progress. So, we always have to look for these little tiny nuances that can really push us. Because, as we get older, it gets a little bit harder. So we need to come up with other creative ways to progress and evolve.
Absolutely, and that's the way to a good life and a long life. And I'm 62.
Wow, you don't look it. You look great.
Yeah, thank you. I'm still running my 10 kilometers, as you'd know from Europe.
Yeah, for sure.
You know what a kilometer is?
I know what a K is.
I could cross-country ski 20 kilometers often at a time. I still cave. I climb through glaciers. In fact, I'm planning on camping on a glacier in May. 20 kilometers ski back, 1,500 meters up. We're in metrics, so we talk the same language.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Where you planning on doing that?
The weekend, about mid-May. I think the 8th of May.
Where are you doing that?
Oh, we're Columbia ice fields. We're going to ski on the Athabasca Glacier and go 20 kilometers back and camp out for a couple nights.
Phenomenal.
That's the plan anyway, and I'm doing this with 30-year-olds.
That's great. You show them how it's done, son.
You bet.
So if anybody was to find you and, maybe people have some questions for you, or they want to actually, check out the device and utilize it themselves, how can they find you?
Mindalive.com. Yeah, just go to the website. Also, our videos are there. Our concussion videos are there. We got a bunch of stuff there. That's probably the best way. Or email us at info@mindalive.com.
Okay. All right. Great. Do you have a social account, Dave?
I have a social person who runs all of our social networking on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and all that. Me personally, I don't get on that much. I'm just way too busy running a business and doing neuroscience stuff, which is always so much fun, and teaching.
Okay, well, then you're going to have to upload some videos on your YouTube of your trip in that glacier. I would be like to check that out.
Well, I could certainly, if you send me your email, I can send you some gorgeous pictures of us down 100, 200 feet into crevices.
Well, that'd be awesome. That would be great.
They're gorgeous. They're blue as the most spectacular blues you could ever see down there.
I should imagine. I'm getting quite jealous. So, yeah, I look forward to that.
All righty.
All right. Well, thank you ever so much. We'll put all these links in the show notes. We'll connect with your social account manager as well and throw those links in there. And, thank you once again for joining us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show.
All right. Thank you.